Yes, institutions that go about helping to not only to educate, but the influence that institutions have on the society and how they help reinforce the philosophy and the ideology of the uh, mentality, and also the psychology of the founders of that particular institution and its curriculum. Um, it wants to remain or hold on to its position of I call it ascendancy. Ascendancy, yes, to to be above other institutions. It's known that the cream rises to the top. And if you don't disturb or bother the cream, it automatically rises to the top. Uh, disturbances of that which humans um, and the creation of human beings in its best state is, I come to conclude, is at its best when it's not under um, or bombarded with distractions and disturbances, and it will ascend. You know, it will rise. Now, um, what one has been introduced to uh, is the influence, is the social, philosophical, ideological influence of the collective psychology of of one's mentality or of a mentality when it comes to institutions, and they represent principles, you know, principles that which they uh, stand on. Uh, not to mention, you know, there are requirements or standards, and the standards are really set by the the institution. Before you go to any school of learning, for the most part, a higher learning, as they will call it. Remember, higher learning, ascendancy. Um, you go through orientation. But any learning, school of learning that you go to, it requires discipline. I think that education is designed to teach people to have affection for discipline. Yeah, I was reading a book by Edward W. Blyton, Christianity, Islam, and the Negro Race, and talk about the influence of Christianity and Islam that it has on the Negro race. He says that when religion was first introduced, it found the people possessing all the elements and enjoying all the privileges of untrampled manhood. Now, this is a association with Mohammedism. Uh, they because manhood is important. Manhood is important. They received as giving them additional power to exert an influence in the world. Universal, universal influence. It sent them forth as the guides and the instructors of their less favored neighbors and endowed them with self respect, which men feel who acknowledge no superior. What that tells me is that one has not an automatic distorted thought, which means he or she is not judgment focused. When you judgment focused, that means you have to make one feel inferior in order to make yourself feel superior. It says untrampled manhood, a human person. He goes on to say, while it brought them a great deal that was absolutely new and inspired them with spiritual feelings to which they had before utter strangers, it strengthened and hastened certain tendencies to independence and self reliance which were already at work. These habits or ways of one's social life of the African were already at work. It it just strengthened them and further reaffirmed that which was already at work. I've come to conclude that mental labor precedes physical labor. And I realize that that which is being exploited is one's human tendencies. So it goes on to say that their local institutions were not destroyed by the Arab influence, introduced. They only assumed new forms and adapted themselves to new teaching. Yes, if we think historically of the teaching of some will call it ancient Kemet, this itself is played out when it comes to the elements of Judaism, of Christianity, and Islam. Yes, the religious institutions, we may call it that, but it said they only assume new forms and adapted themselves to new teachings. Uh, People argue over methodology, but the principle stays the same. Now, all thriving Mohammedan communities in West and Central Africa, it may be noticed that the Arab superstructure has been superimposed as a permanent indigenous substructure, uh, so that what really took place when the Arab met the Negro in his own home was a healthy amalgamation or amalgamation, uh, and not an absorption or an undue repression. Uh, People look for variety in life, and many who understand what they call the so-called blacks and so-called whites and British amalgamation, when it created help. They made the blacks became a part of a upper class, and if we see it in this day and time when we look at the amalgamation, uh, um, of a lot of the so-called uh, uh, black people in America, how they become rich. That's all it is. It's amalgamation. You know what I'm saying? Um, and it says here, not in absorption or an undue repression. And it seems as though what I'm saying is that even though the blacks in America are becoming more wealthier um, in material, it is really maybe fulfilling what Booker T. Washington may be saying, that we will be, when he appealed to consensus of from economic reasons of whites and what they call the Atlantic, what is called the Atlantic Compromise. That's an interesting word. And even though Booker T. Washington said they're not, blacks are not equal to whites, only symbolically, which is uh, uh, um, which means really a non-being. I can't think of the term. Uh, but this undue repression, because you have repression, you have oppression, and you have suppression. And the Oriental aspect of Islam has become largely modified in the Negro land, not as too generally supposed by degrading compromise with the pagan superstitions. Now, the word pagan, and someone comes up with something, a term, and they call it a pagan, that doesn't mean that it is so. But by shaping many of its traditional customs to suit the milder, this is the point that I wanted to make, the milder and more conciliatory disposition of the Negro. Hmm. I've often said that we need to go through conciliatory healing, overcoming animosity, distrust, and anxiety. But the shaping the institution, or institutions, put it that way, is not supposed to degrade nor put the people in position who are going through these learning institutions to compromise the integrity and the dignity of any individual who's in the school of thought, or in the school of learning. Because if we look at this best body of knowledge, which is creation, it does not degrade. It's not to be degraded. It is not to be compromised. It is not to be devalued. It is not to be disrespected. But it's designed heterogeneously or suitable for the correct and right disposition of those who are on this plane of existence. And when we come to this understanding, we will evolve and mature and interact with one another as respectable, decent human beings, and become practitioners of social maturity, because this universe is a benefit, not just for a few, but for all. So we look at how the material or the mineral resources that come from the earth and how it is processed into of material value to benefit. But yet someone with a mentality that come and control how that should be managed and distributed. That's the challenge. And you have the people have the audacity to come up with a term called minimum wage. But yet it says that the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God eternal life. Wage is like you're betting on something. But we always associate things with material. But the wage is a meaningful life. Like righteousness is a win-win situation. To find meaning, to live a meaningful life. And sin is a lack of accountability, recidivism, moral and cultural decline. When you don't have a meaningful life, that is moral and cultural decline. And the gift is our presence. And therefore, the breath that is in us is the life. To take that is called abbreviated life expectancy. Until next time, talk to you.